Thank you. Before the witness, a couple of comments. I want to invite Senator Cassidy to join the Climate Change Caucus, and I want to use his charts the next time I'm on the floor talking about climate change, although I know in Louisiana part of the problem is subsidence rather than necessarily sea level rise, but that's coming. And also, Senator Daines, we're going to have to change the name of that park to the park formerly known as Glacier. Because there were 150 glaciers when the park was founded. They're now 26. They've retreated 39% in the last 50 years. That's accelerating. And we just got to take cognizance of what's happening in our national parks. Is one of the, I guess, canary in the coal mine, and Glacier is probably the most prominent. Secretary Zinke, first, I'm not going to lobby you. I want to thank you for visiting our beautiful Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument that's already having positive economic effects in our region, but I'm not going to lobby you. I really want to thank you for going, sincerely. I once went on a congressional trip, and an old man in a foreign country said, "I know why you're here." And I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "Because one day of seeing is better than 30 days of reading." And you went to see, and I deeply appreciate your committing. You met a commitment to me. You made at the hearing to go to Maine, and I'm just delighted that you did that. So I want to thank you for that.
It was a wonderful experience, and I'm sure you're going to be enthusiastic about the recommendation.
Well, that's as much as I can ask.
As well as the governor. I've talked to the governor, so I think we have a reasonable approach to the recommendation that all parties will be satisfied with.
I congratulate you on that and look forward to the recommendation. In terms of the cuts to the national park, many people have talked about it. You mentioned that a substantial part of the cuts will take place in the bureaucracy, if you will, as opposed to the individual parks. Are there cuts at individual parks that will hit the operating budgets?
On the reorganization, again, what I see is the front line, the specific parks are too short. In the case of the monument in Maine, there's only one superintendent there. And you can add one superintendent plus, a detailed person. And when you go up there, clearly the infrastructure required there with bathrooms and signs and working together with the state, when you incorporate something under a public trust in either a park service or a monument, then there's also an obligation on our side to make sure that it is done right. Bears ears in that conversation, there is no doubt some antiquities there that are well-deserving of federal protection. But what I didn't see is I didn't see any signs. I didn't see any bathrooms at the trailheads. I didn't see any parking lots. In one case, in Escalante, I saw a German van with 3 Germans in it, with kayaks looking for the great staircases, which is, there's no staircase, by the way. This is not a kayak thing. But if we're going to assume the primary responsibility of preserving something, then we have to also assume the responsibility to make sure we preserve it. And that's infrastructure, signage, monitoring, and those things that are necessary to do that.
And in the individual parks, as we're looking around the country, whether it's Yellowstone or Olympia or Acadia in Maine, do you anticipate operational budget cuts, or are you talking about simply regional administration cuts?
What I anticipate, I don't individually, very doubtful. Parks probably what I've done in the headquarters is, as far as the hiring freeze, I maintained it in Washington and maintained it in Denver, so we could push bodies to where they belong out in the front, and you'll see a movement to make sure we shore up and expand the front line. The regional scientists, they're all in the USGS, and that was the decision from a couple secretaries ago. What we're looking at is how to return the scientists back out to the field to where they do more field work rather than headquarters work. But there are some minor adjustments in the budget. But I think as we go through the process and coordinate with you on reorganization, what our goal is to make the parks not only whole, but give more assets in the front line and reduce the middle and upper management
In
side
the Armed
of it.
Services Committee, we talk about tooth to tail. We're talking about more tooth and less tail, and I don't necessarily object to that point of view. Well, a final question or final comment. One of the items in the budget or in the plan is a suspension of the advisory commissions to the national parks, and they're under review. I can't speak for other parks. I can tell you that the Advisory Commission at Acadia in Maine is very important, makes a great contribution. They're volunteer members. There's some administrative costs, I understand, and that's what we're talking about. But I think this is a case where the value to the park system in terms of good relations with its neighbors outweighs the fairly minor savings from the administrative costs associated. So I commend to you from personal experience the value of the advisory commissions.
Well, and I have 220, which was I was surprised the number. And this is what I asked. You know, rather than going to individual advisory groups and say, well, I'm going to suspend this, I suspended them all with this caveat. Tell me who's on your board. Tell me what you've done the last year. Tell me what you've done the last 5 years. Tell me what your budget is, and tell me what your goal is. And if you had an issue, they could ask for an exemption to meet. And as far as Acadia, they did not request an exemption yet, but it was really about 2 pages maximum. Because now I'm responsible for these 220 boards to a degree. I just want to know, and I would think the overwhelming number of boards do great things, and it just was an opportunity to me to know who was on the board, look through what their goals are, which I think is important. And then if I had any questions, I could ask. But I assume that we'll have all the paperwork on those boards. If Acadia is meeting, which I understand they want to meet in the summer, all they have to do is put in a request for exemption, and certainly I would understand that.
Sounds like the national park version of trust but verify.
Trust but verify. I just want to know, you know, and we spend about $15 million, which on the scale of the overall budget's not much, but if you're a plumber, $15 million is a lot of money. So as the steward of the taxpayers' dollars, I just want to know what the great things the boards are doing, who's on the board, what they've done the last years, what they've done the last 5 years, and then be glad to write them a card and say thank you for their service, and then invite them to D.C. to talk to them.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Madam Chairman.